Joining us right now, the legend all across Canada. Everyone knows him. Great pipes, great smile, and a guy that's called so many games. Vic Rauter of TSN. Vic, welcome, my friend.
Hey, Anthony. How are you?
I'm very good. It is our pleasure to have you on. It is so great to have you on, Vic. And I thought of you the last couple weeks, Vic, when I tweeted out my source giving me the information that a new Canadian Premier League will launch in 2018, hopefully. And I thought, who better to talk about the old days in the CSL, where I worked with the Rockets for a couple years, and you called so many with the legend himself that, God rest his soul, is gone as well, Graham Leggett.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts, your feelings back then, Vic. We went from Nova Scotia to Victoria. The travel was grueling. The players were there. Give us an overall, synopsis of the league back then and what it meant to you and to Canada.
Well, you have to think back. It was started in '87, so we're going back quite a ways. But it was after that World Cup, the last World Cup for Canada, Mexico '86, and Dale Barnes thought there should be a place for Canadians to play. And to his credit, he was able to bring, I believe it was Hyundai, on board as the first major sponsor. And so they played for the Hyundai Cup. And we started out, I think, innocently, with teams in North York, Montreal, Toronto. In fact, I don't think Montreal was there that first year. But we had Vancouver and Edmonton, Calgary. And it gave a place. It was semi-pro at best. Let's be quite honest. The fellows were making a living, but they have to supplement their incomes, I think, elsewhere. But they had some good players, and I think most importantly, it gave an avenue for Canadian players primarily to play the game. And from that, you got the likes of an Alex Bunbury, who would be picked up and spend most of his professional career in Portugal with Maritimo. Paul Pescasolido out of Scarborough, Ontario, ends up going to England to play. I think made it as far as the first division. But that's what it was basically about. It was giving guys a chance to play. And interestingly enough, and I won't ramble here, there were several Americans that would come up, including Ted Eck from the United States, who is now a coach in MLS, and several other players who are now in MLS in coaching capacity. So it was something that Canada had that the Americans did not.
Vic, also what was real special back then, that there was a spot for the Canadian coach on that bench. The Vancouver 86ers, the Calgary team, the North York Rockets, the Blizzard. Canadian coaches were given an opportunity to ply their trade, their passion, their desire to be a professional coach as well.
Well, sure. I mean, Bobby Leonarduzzi, for one, in Vancouver, and you're right. It was all about Canada, and for myself and for Graham and all of us at TSN, for 6 years, we did the Sunday night game of the week. Now, don't forget, too, it was a different time. We weren't into the age of satellite TV as much then. So, Graham had his shows during the Premier League season, and he was still showing highlights from the week before and just updating scores. Now, of course, you're seeing all the games from England. You're seeing them from Serie A. You're seeing from the Bundesliga. You're seeing it from La Liga. You're having a chance to see all those games. And it's a little more difficult, I think. While I wish the Canadian League well, this new, the announced league, I wish them all the success in the world, because I think Canadians need a chance to play. But I think it's going to be difficult for them.
What do you think is going to be the stumbling blocks? Looking back then, to me, I think the biggest stumbling block was the amount of money that was spent on travel. I'll never forget, Vic.
Oh, no, listen, I think if he could look back and change something, well, maybe they should have done is had the East Conference, West Conference, West play West, and then you come together in a crossover and you do a championship that way. But let's remember, there were, as you mentioned, at one point in time, they went from Victoria to Halifax. Teams were going on a Western road trip and playing 3 games in a week. So you might play Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, all on the road. And that was, for teams that weren't bringing in a lot at the gate, that was pretty expensive. You had to have owners whose pockets were pretty deep. And I think it just collapsed under its own weight.
And Vic, you talk about the owners. There was some characters. I worked for a guy in Tony Fontana. God bless him. He never missed a paycheck. He treated the players and guys like myself on the staff like gold. You had Mario and Hamilton. You had Karsten.
Mayo, yeah.
What talk about him?
There's Mario. I mean, you remember it also, listen, there were some terrific players that came across to play. Justin Fashanu played for Hamilton, played for Toronto. And I remember he initially played in Hamilton, Justin did. Then he was let go or traded to Toronto. I can't remember which. And we're playing out at the stadium out by the airport in Toronto.
Esther Shiner?
Yes, thank you. Centennial Stadium.
Oh, Centennial, yes.
Centennial. And by the garbage ski hill there, if I remember correctly. And Mario is saying things to him, yelling down from that press box. The next thing I hear, cleats on the staircase, and Fashanu has run up the staircase and wants to get into the owner's box to take him on. I mean, and listen, Esther Shiner Stadium, tucked in behind the high school there at Bathurst and
Finch.
I mean, it was the smallest little thing. But, again, it was part of being in the Canadian League. I can remember going down and playing, doing a game in Kitchener, the Kitchener Kickers.
Yep.
And they had their stadium right beside where the Kitchener Rangers hockey team plays. I think it was also called Centennial Stadium. And I can remember going into this little green box with Graham, and all you saw was the traffic going by on the highway, and you thought to yourself, oh, this is Canadian soccer. I mean, it was in some places very much, I'll say it, big league. Vancouver gave you that impression. Toronto gave you that impression when they played at varsity. Montreal at the Centre Claude Robillard. But some of those places, I remember going to Terry Fox Stadium in Aylmer, Quebec, across the river from Ottawa. We were in a little green hut, and there was water on the floor from overnight rain, and Graham says, we're not going to make it out alive. We're going to die. We're going to be electrocuted here. But again, those are the kind of stories you take with you, and we used to reminisce about, and you'd say, do you remember that? And do you remember that? It really was, for Canadian soccer, I come back again to the fact that we had that going for us, and the Americans didn't.
Absolutely. And what we also had going for us was something unique that other leagues didn't try. And you were part of this in your time, so was I, where we signed an NHL player to play with us. God rest his soul, Peter Zezel. And he,
Yes.
and he attracted a lot of his teammates to come and watch games. And we would have autograph sessions with Wendell Clark, Ty Domi, Mike Ricci, the Flyers, on and on. You needed to think outside of the box. We also had a draft, if you recall. Vic, where Dale Barnes was in charge of it, and we had guys actually, being drafted from local youth clubs, and it was fantastic.
Well, listen, let's take a few years forward now. Come up to Major League Soccer, and their academy system is starting now, and you look at the teams now, and from Montreal, its academy, the number of players on their side. The Toronto Academy, TFC, Vancouver, all these academies are paying off. And in fact, the Canadian League was one big academy when you think about it, the number of players. But really the guys who were in it played for the love of the game. They were trying to keep their playoff, they were trying to keep careers alive, trying to keep their names in front of the coaches for possible national team duty. Although for the most part, they still went overseas for those kind of players. But the Canadian League served its purpose. My disappointment came at times with the people who shunned it, those people who said, it's so good. You know what? It was the best that we had at the time. And it bothers me sometimes when people say, well, are you a soccer fan? Yes. Well, would you go watch well, I'll give you a good example. The 1990 World Cup, and Tommy Docherty came over to work the desk with myself and Dick Howard. And we took Tommy to the airport far as after was over. That was Novanta, so that would have been the Italian win, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting there having a drink before he gets on the plane, and some fella comes up and with his great English accent and says, "Hello, Mr. Doherty, I used to watch you all the time." Oh, and I said, "From where are you in England?" He goes, "Peterborough." "Oh, well, that's nice." I said, "Where do you live?" He says, "I live in Burlington." Well, I said, "Do you ever go to Brian Timmins Stadium and watch the Hamilton Steelers play?" And he said, "Why would I want to watch that crap for?" And I said, "You're from Peterborough, sir. You're barely second division. What do you mean crap?" But that is what people thought, and that's the problem that a lot of people have. Why would I go watch that? If you love the game, you're going to watch the game.
And the problem is this, Vic, and I've said this time and time again, I will take this to my death. If I'm ever alive to ever watch Italy play Canada in a World Cup in my house, my two sons and my wife and I will all be decked out in Canadian red. I could care less about Italy. I am born here, raised here. When Canada's not in the World Cup, I will cheer for Italy. And this is the disease we still have here, Vic, is that everyone supports England, Portugal, Italy, Spain, Chile, you name it, and doesn't put the focus, as well as the Americans have done for the last 20 years, Vic, you know this better than I going down there, they get behind their nation here.
Right.
All we do is bicker, complain, and whine.
And it's a bit of a problem. Look, we come from a diverse culture, and that makes for a wonderful country. But I'll give you an example. Back in the day, there was something called the Sir Stanley Matthews Cup.
Mm-hmm.
And Canada played Greece in a game at
Varsity.
the old Varsity Stadium. And there was 21,000 people there, of which I bet you 19,000 were cheering for the Greeks. The Greeks came out and they just sort of nonchalantly kicked it around. Canada said, "To hell with you, we're playing here." And Canada eventually ended up winning the game. Do you know what? Everyone by the end of the game, Greek or not, was cheering for Canada. The diversity presents a problem when it comes to a Canadian soccer identity. You can talk about Italian soccer and its identity. You can talk about the Germans, the way they play, the Spaniards, the way they play, the Dutch, whatever it happens to be. Canada has no identity, and the reason being, and this is the difficulty that Holger Osiek had when he was here as head coach, and he tried to implement this system. Is that you would love to get all the clubs in provincial associations to try and play the same way. That there's a system. But if I was to say to you, or if you had 6 people there of different ethnic background, and you said to the Englishman, "Who's the best soccer team in the world?" they'd say the English. And the Italian would say the Italian, and the Portuguese guy would say Portugal, Italy, whomever it may say, would say that they swear that their soccer is the best. And that's a problem. From whenever I got involved back in the old Blizzard days at Global TV, we have no soccer identity here because we have so many identities. We have a uniform identity.
You're 100% bang on, Vic, and that's the problem that we need to crush and need to fix, like the United States has done. They haven't fixed it completely, but they've chipped away at it, and they have a wonderful supporting fans that travel all over to watch them play. They've ingrained it in their youth system down there, their academy system, that you play for USA. Why? Because they've gone to World Cup after World Cup. You know, Vic, we really appreciate your time. But before we let you go, after you, we've got Dale Mitchell coming on. In the last number of weeks, I've had on Alex Bumbry, Carlo Corazine, Catliff, on and on, a bunch of guys. I've had on, Paul Pescasolido. And we talked about the days of the CSL, Thomas Radinsky. And they say to me, "Anthony, you remember? We never used to get schooled or played by the Americans. We played them. We schooled them. Today, they're doing that to us." And it's a fact, Vic. And you go back and you talked about Tedek. And I remember Tommy Sohn and some others.
Sure.
I think still today we can actually close the gap on the Americans if we start doing things the right way, if we're all united, if we're all understanding how bad we are and we get going what we need to do.
Well, listen, it's difficult because could you, in fact, I said this the other day when we were in Montreal and doing a game, and we were just kicking things around, and I said, "Do you think after the Canadian failure in the World Cup qualifying, I said, do you think the Canadian team could just field MLS players?" And no, you still need that influence. You still need the expertise of some of your European players. The problem is Benito Florio, more than once I heard, he never, ever visited an MLS team. Why is that? Your national team coach never went to see the 3 MLS teams while he was here. Why don't you do? Aren't you supposed to go out and reach out and say, try to work with that player and say, hey, talk to them. What can I do? What is the strength of that player? How can I then use that player to my advantage, to Canada's advantage? It's going to be difficult, whoever comes in to take over. And the other thing, too, is we're at a disadvantage here. I don't know what MLS is going to do with regards to the Canadians and the import rule. Because right now, Canada, and as you well know, and you've probably talked about, Canadian players in MLS are at a disadvantage. They're considered an import player. And that needs to be taken care of. Well, Canadian players should be able to travel back and forth across the border. You need to have more Canadians like Kyle Lauren down playing in Orlando against TFC tonight. You need to have more Canadians playing on MLS clubs in the United States. But we only get the few and far between.
And we won't get that because a Canadian player, Vic, you know this better than I, is disrespected, not treated fairly, like a second-class citizen. And meanwhile, the 3 Canadian clubs, TFC, Montreal, and Vancouver, have poured millions and millions into the head offices of MLS. They've brought in world-class players like Drogba, Montreal, Jovinko here, Morales in Vancouver. They lead in attendance, all 3 of those clubs, against any others. And we're treated like second-class citizens. That's why the appetite, Vic, is there. That's why I keep getting flooded with emails, messages, and phone calls of former CSL players in tears, Vic, calling me saying, Anthony, it's time for us to take care of our own, bring back our Canadian league.
But listen to me for a second. I agree with you. And Commissioner Garber, we had him on the air about 2.5 weeks ago in Montreal. And I asked him again. 4th team, a Canadian team, somewhere in the West, Calgary, Edmonton, I don't care. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. No amount of money. No, I can't. If they throw a bank at him, maybe he'll change his mind. But they're not going to put another Canadian team in. The weather has certainly something to do with it. I'll give you that. But why not a 4th Canadian team? Isn't that possible? Sure, it would be possible. They're not going to go that way. That is the problem. Now, somebody wrote an article, well, maybe it's time for the Toronto FC and Montreal and Vancouver to pull out of MLS. Are you kidding me? That's never going to happen. And that's the problem that the Canadian Soccer League is going to face. We live in an age where people want to see the best.
I agree, Vic, and I hate to interrupt. I agree, but there's an appetite to watch the local Canadian kid play for the local Vaughan team.
Or what, though? What's he going to get? Other than the experience, is he going to make a living out of it? No. Not a chance. Is he going to be semi-pro at best?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so if you want to then put teams, where are you going to put them?
Well, I can.
Are you going to put them in the suburbs, for example? You're not going to put it down. You're not going to put them downtown anywhere in Toronto. You're not going to put them in Montreal proper or Vancouver. You're going to put them in the Vancouver interior. You're going to put one in Victoria. You're going to run into the same kind of problems. And if a person has an opportunity, and you have to think, is this league going to be based? Is the majority of their money going to come from ticket sales? I'm thinking so. How many tickets are you going to sell on a given night?
No, and I agree with everything you say, but from what I understand and from what I know, Vic, these are real deep-pocketed owners, passionate owners that care about Canada, the Canadian players, smart business people. This time around, there's going to be a smart business plan in place. They're going to put franchises in strategic places. Look, I'll be honest with you, Vic. I think if when you asked Don Garber, will there be another Canadian team? I think I would have said to him, why not another one in Toronto? New York's got 2. Why not two in LA?
No.
You mean to tell me Toronto can't host 2? Absolutely, they could, Vic.
Oh, listen, I can tell you why. So why? I mean, it's the same argument can be said about the NHL. Why isn't there a second one? Why aren't they playing up in Vaughan right now or up in Markham, for gosh sakes? I don't disagree with you, but it's not going to happen. They do not want another Canadian team. Listen, again, Anthony, I hate to be a naysayer. I just really don't. I agree with you. I think Canadian players need to play, and they need to play at the highest level possible. But again, TFC, Vancouver, Montreal, they have their TFC 2s and Montreal 2, or whatever they're called, their secondary team. They're all playing in that USL. And again, how many leagues can you have? You've got Ottawa playing in NASL. You've got Edmonton playing in NASL. So where do they fit now there? So you're going to now bring another league into play? The people are going to look at this and go, well, what the hell's this? Where does this fit in the chain? You've got MLS, you've got NASL, you've got USL, and now you've got a Canadian. Well, okay, where is this? Is it first division, second? It's probably third division soccer.
Well, we could go on and on. I agree with some of the points you make, Vic. Look, to me, I don't want to slam either one of the three MLS clubs. I've said this. God bless TFC, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. All they've ever done is write the checks, kept their mouth shut. They've brought us a first-rate product here for the last couple of years with the players. Montreal, Joey Saputo, lights out for me, the best owner in MLS. He wants to win. Vancouver, we know, Bobby Leonarduzzi in the group there, wonderful support. I'm not here to embarrass, spotlight these clubs to say, and it's not my responsibility or our responsibility to embarrass them and say, play more Canadians. Why should they? They're a private business. I've said that. It's a private business. We shouldn't have to force them or make them feel bad. But then again, we need a spot for our Canadian kids to play. If it means having a new Canadian league, so be it.
Go back to, now you may remember this, go back to the days when the Americans were hosting the World Cup. And it was sponsored by Budweiser. And do you remember they took all the American guys, their team, and they basically put them together for about a year, almost 2 years.
Yes.
They played, I think, out of St. Louis.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes. Keep going. I know where you're going.
And my point is that it was prep for a World Cup. But I've always thought that that's an avenue to explore. Could you, in fact, put a Team Canada together? You'd have to play them. You'd have to pay them very well, though. And again, where would they play? And what league would they play in? I don't know. But, if you want to give Canadians the top level to play, then do something with them. Let them play more friendlies. Get them together more often. The way we do it now with the friendlies, how are you supposed to build a cohesive team?
Everything you say, I can't argue with, Vic. I cannot argue.
Yeah.
I can't argue, Vic. Vic, it's been an unbelievable pleasure. It's an honor to have.
I'm glad you reached out, my friend. It's to reminisce.
Oh, you're a class act. As I said, you're a legend. A beautiful smile. The time we used to spend quite a bit at Esther Shiner before games.
Esther Shiner. And listen, I have to tell you something. We lost Graham last year.
Yes. Yep.
Earlier this year, I guess, and he's been posthumously going to be inducted into the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame. So I'm thrilled about that, yeah.
Absolutely. And Vic, we'll let you go. Give us a memory, please, of back in the days of Canadian soccer. What is a game you'll never forget? Is it a championship game? Is it maybe a weird game? Give us a memory as we let you go that you'll...
Well, listen, I used to love going to Swangard Stadium in Burnaby, and there's again, I remember the Vancouver Whitecaps, or the Vancouver 86ers at that time with Bobby and, Dominic Mobilio. What a wonderful player he was. We lost far too soon. No, it really was. It was a great time. It was an innocent time. We had, TSN had been on the air only a couple of years, 3 years at best. So, no, it's been my pleasure to be associated with a wonderful game like soccer.
Absolutely. And I have the VHS tape with the call of Verduzco!
Oh, against
Brazil. Unbelievable. I cry still when I watch that. My kids watch and they say...
Unbelievable.
I know. They don't believe it.
Who was in goal? Taffarel, wasn't it?
Yeah, Taffarel. And then they went on to go win the World Cup.
Right. And I mean, the Brazilians, that place... I'll tell you a quick story if you've got them a second.
Yes.
So we're in Edmonton, and it's a friendly, it's a prep. You know, the Brazilian media covered that there had to be about a dozen radio stations from Brazil covering the practice live. That's how fanatical they are about the game. I mean, but by the same token, that's how fanatical we are about certain sports in our country, right? But there's Graham and I on the sideline and watching the Brazilians practice, and up in the booth you can hear them yelling and screaming at each other, and we could just count them, a dozen radio stations, all on the air, talking about who's playing what position, what they're going to do, analyzing it to death. Yeah, right? Some special moments.
Absolutely. Vic,
Anthony, thanks, my friend. What a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure, and enjoy your work. Keep it great work on TSN as you've always done for years.
Hey.
And we'll catch up with you down the road again, hopefully maybe when Canada gets to World Cup, my friend.
You said you got Carl coming on you next?
Yeah, Dale Mitchell. Dale Mitchell's coming on next.
Say hi to Dale for me, please, and I wish him the very best.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Vic, for making time, my friend.
Anthony, you
Good
take
night.
care of yourself.